Saviors of Uldum is almost here, and that means it's time to lock in my predictions for the legendary quests.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
Yeah, I'm going to rank these quests from worst to best, which means you should bookmark this video, come back in a year and a half after they finally rotated, and make fun of just how wrong I was on some of these quests. But let's go ahead and take a look at my rankings. At number 9, or the worst of the quests, I have Unseal the Vault for Hunter. I think this one's going to suffer because of two things. Number one, it's really, really hard to activate. 20 minions is a lot. You might think, oh, well, there's all kinds of cards that can summon you 4 or 5 minions at a time, Regis. There are, but they aren't all good, and it still takes a long time for that to stack up. I got to play this one already, and it felt really tough to get to 20, like lots and lots of turns. Sometimes you might only be summoning 1 or 2 minions, right? And those turns add up and really slow this down. Beyond that, the reward here, giving your minions 2 attack for 2 mana, is only good if you actually have minions that can attack immediately, right? You're looking to push and create pressure in Hunter. So things like charge minions or minions that are already hanging around on board. And that's not necessarily an easy state to achieve either. If you're playing from behind, it can often be a really, really weak hero power, and sometimes even worse than the default Hunter hero power. So basically this one fails on both the conditions that have to be met and even the reward, leaving it pretty firmly in last place for me. Moving on to Hack the System for Warrior. This is another one I can see struggling because attacking 5 times with a hero is a little bit of an awkward thing to do. Again, it might seem easy, but just having enough weapons to satisfy that, finding a deck that can build in weapons safely without risking consistency because you're just only drawing weapons. Even, you might say things like Soul Thrays could be really good at achieving this quest, but that comes really late in the game all of a sudden. And the reward for Hack the System just gives you a 4-3 most of the time, or occasionally a couple 4-3s, which later and later in the game have far less of an impact, and depending on your deck style, might not really matter much at all, and your opponent could just ignore them. So a fast deck that's playing aggressively with weapons has to give up a nice turn 1 and some mulligan options for Hack the System. A slower deck may not utilize the hero power all that much. So between those two things, this just seems like it's going to struggle. It's also got to compete with Dr. Boom Mad Genius for now in standard format, which typically I think we envision as having much, much better hero powers than this one. So there are just a handful of reasons it seems like this card's going to struggle. Moving on to making mummies for Paladin. I have to say this quest feels okay. It's not hard to complete. There are a lot of reborn minions, and the reward can be pretty interesting with things like Mechano Egg. Creating a 2/2 copy of a Mechano Egg is a really powerful 2-mana play because you get a nice 2/2 body with an 8/8 Death Rattle attached to it, right? There's some pretty cool stuff you can do with mechs and magnetic plays, and it's not bad with reborn either. So this kind of reborn mech synergy deck does suit making mummies fairly well. The downside for this card is that you have to run reborn cards that perhaps aren't great cards. We look at some of the reborn cards and I have to wonder if they're good enough, and you're going to be playing worse cards than your opponent. Beyond that, the reward can be a little bit passive, where you play it and it's just kind of sitting there, that 2/2 minion. Your opponent doesn't necessarily have to interact with it, and you're just playing from behind and you can't quite turn the corner to utilize that hero power in a more powerful way. So also we know that Reborn is a keyword that will be expansion specific unless something drastically changes in the Hearthstone dev's mind, as most keywords are. Things like Overkill we saw was expansion specific, Twin Spell, etc. So that means that if this quest does ever work, it's only got a really tiny time frame to do it, right? It's not going to get better over time because there won't be better reborn minions added to the pool. So that just decreases the likelihood that it's going to succeed because it's got a smaller window in which to do so. And that means it's still pretty near the bottom of the barrel for all these quests. So moving on to activate the Obelisk here. A lot of people like this quest. This one seems to be like 50-50 split down the middle of the community. Some people think it's like 5 stars awesome. People like me think it's considerably weaker. And yet again, we have one here where I think it's harder to achieve than people realize. 15 health is tough to do sometimes. You got to have the right board states, the right damaged minions, the right hands to actually get this all lined up and complete it in a reasonable amount of time, which is a struggle. And I've seen people try to do it and it was tough to work in most cases. And even then, the reward for this card is powerful, but it's another one of those rewards that's much better when you're ahead on board. You're able to utilize those stats immediately. If you're playing it more passively, just kind of dropping a minion and buffing it, you're giving your opponent the ability to sort of ignore those stats in many cases, or just run over you and not care anyway because they're a much faster deck. So sacrificing your mulligan spot, sacrificing that opener in a tempo deck doesn't work as well. The one way I think this can still work is in a control slow style deck where it's just an inevitability. You don't build your deck to support it, and you give yourself, a direct upgrade to your hero power with some additional upside with these stats. So I'm not totally counting it out. That's why it's not at the bottom of my list, but still pretty near to the bottom because I do think it has some struggles and some tough things to overcome. Moving on here to Supreme Archaeology for Warlock. We have here another quest with a big number. 20 cards have to be drawn. And outside of things like plot twist, that takes a really, really long time to achieve. And even with plot twist, if you draw, 8 to 10 cards, you still got a little work and mana put into completing your Supreme Archaeology. And then at that point, how much have you sacrificed to get to this hero power that I think is actually a pretty powerful hero power? Clearly drawing things for free is awesome, but you have to put enough good things in your deck and high-powered things to create a significant enough mana discount gap there, right? You want to run like 10 mana things because then they become 0 mana things. Big threats, awesome stuff. And that can be maybe hard to do if you're spending all your time drawing cards, you're using life tap and losing health. It might be hard to stabilize and survive. You can certainly put some control tools in Warlock, and I'm a little bit hopeful for it. That's why it's, in the middle part of our list here, but I still think there are going to be a lot of challenges to lining this one up and surviving to a game state where you actually want to be able to use this hero power and you can make some pretty significant and big plays with it. That's going to be tough to get there. Once you do, it'll feel good, so it's got a chance. I just think it's going to be a tough one. Moving on here, we have Raid the Sky Temple for Mage, a quest I think a lot of people are envisioning in that kind of 3-star territory. I like it a little better. I originally gave it 5 stars in my reviews, maybe dialing back on that a little bit after seeing it in action, but I still think it's better than a lot of these quests because it offers infinite value. The hero power here, just generating you resources over and over again, is something we've seen be a frustrating element in Hearthstone in the past. If a control deck can get to that game state where they're just making stuff turn after turn, think about Dr. Boom, Mad Genius, Deathstalker, Rexar, then those can create some great moments and some wins that would otherwise be impossible. Now, I think this is obviously weaker than things like Delivery Drone or Rexar's Build a Beast hero power, but nonetheless, there are still some great mage spells. You're going to occasionally hit some big, nice resource stuff, board clears, power of creations. You'll occasionally whiff on cheaper spells too, but they'll still be stacking up in your hand over time and allowing you to generate so many additional cards that you can maybe just overwhelm your opponent with resources, even if you're only hitting half the time on something really, really big. Now, as far as completing this quest is concerned, you got to build a deck in a way to support these 10 spells. I think things like Mana Cyclone make that far easier to do. Just running cheap spells, Mana Cyclone, Sorcerer's Apprentice, that package could work really, really well with Raid the Sky Temple, but finding a deck that kind of melds a grinder control style with a Mana Cyclone style might be hard. Plus, it just has to overcome Conjurer's Calling at the moment, which seems like a difficult thing to do because it's just such a powerful way to play Mage. So this is not going to be a free path to success for Raid the Sky Temple, but I can still envision a world where this becomes a significant part of the class. Up next here, we have the Bizarre Burglary for Rogue, and this quest is going to give you a nice little weapon there that allows you to attack with immunity or maybe just pump out lots of damage, because we have seen in the past things like the 2/2 upgraded hero power for Rogue in Odd Rogue were just crazy good, so it should be even better here to get the reward from Bizarre Burglary. And the cool thing about this quest is that it's not actually that hard to achieve. You only have to hit 4 cards added to your hand from another class, and there are a bunch of tools, both new and old, to help Rogue do that. And they often want to spend their early turns doing those sorts of things anyway, so they're not really sacrificing a ton in order to run Bizarre Burglary, except, of course, their 1-mana opener play, which some decks won't want to give up, but others might be willing to do so. So I think that originally I envisioned hitting this quest on like turn 6 or 7. Now I'm thinking it's far easier to do it in the mid-game where the weapon becomes more relevant much faster, which makes this a pretty powerful tool for Rogue, because that is just a really, really good weapon almost no matter what kind of deck you're playing, whether you're keeping your opponent's minions in check and playing for some kind of late game or combo situation, or you're just playing for like a mid-game swing style where you want to get the board and leverage it for damage, this weapon can achieve that because it's just damage output and free and clear board trading as well. So great asset here in the hero power, not that difficult to achieve in a class that likes the sort of things that this does already. That seems like an equation that's going to add up for some success for Bizarre Burglary. Moving on to the number 2 spot here, I have Untapped Potential. Now, this is a card I don't think is going to be played right away. I'm not sure that the meta or Druid's card packages right now support what this is all about. There may not be quite enough payoff yet, but I can see a ton of upside in this card because there are already some pretty insanely powerful plays with this card, getting 2 5/5 rush minions, for instance. Getting a 6/6 taunt and healing for 12 is pretty ridiculous. There's a lot of stuff even back to the classic set that is good with Untapped Potential. So as soon as this quest finishes, this reward is very, very strong. I could almost see a Quest Druid being like a tier 3 deck anyway, but as you get more and more choose one cards added into the pool, as we increase the standard format size in the next expansion, I think this one's ready to blow up. It might take a bit to move to that tier 2 or tier 1 spot, but I can see it getting there so very easily. And because I'm respecting that potential and the upside and the raw power that this completed quest can achieve, that's why I'm putting this one so high, despite the lag it might take to get it there. And beyond that, I found it's really not that difficult to activate this quest. You don't give up a ton along the way. You still have a lot of mana to work with, and it's so swingy once it's finished that you don't even necessarily mind losing a little tempo along the way. It's only 4 turns. That's not that significant. So not hard to complete, and a huge upside means Untapped Potential to me has a lot of untapped potential. And then finally here for my number 1 spot, we have Corrupt the Waters for Shaman. This was really one of the most promising things I saw in playing Savers of Uldum early so far, because very easy to play 6 Battlecry cards, and you've got things like Sludge Slurpers and Lackeys and all this craziness. This comes out very, very quickly, and then beyond that, the reward is quite powerful. Doubling your Battlecries means you can do some ridiculous things, again, with things like Lackeys or raw damage output. I was using this with cards like the new Wasp and Life Drinker in order to do just tons of burst damage to my opponent's face. That's a really scary possibility, but you can also use this to generate tons of value if you want as well, adding resources to your hand, playing for tempo with tons of minions on board from things that summon things. So essentially, this card can go in any one of a direction you need for whatever deck you want to put it into, as long as you have cheap Battlecries to get the quest done. The reward is incredibly flexible, and it seems like there's so much power level tied to this reward. It's efficient to do because most Battlecries, if you can play more than 1 or 2 in a turn, 2 mana is not much to spend at all. The rewards are going to be way worth that 2 mana because you get such output from it. All in all, it just lines up. It makes sense. It feels good to play, and there's already a lot of evidence, I think, that this is a good card. And I think that the expansion will prove that true pretty quickly, making Corrupt the Waters my easy number 1 choice. And there you go, folks. That's it for my quest rankings. I'm curious where you guys land on these. I can imagine these being hotly debated. I know that some of you like Priest. Some of you may not like Druid quite as much. I think I'm a little higher on Mage than most people. So put your rankings in the comments below, of course. I want to see what you guys have to say. See if you can get it exactly right. We'll come back after these cards rotate out, maybe take a look at this and see how we did, because it's going to be fun to watch these unfold. All that said, thanks much for your time. Thanks for watching. And until next time, game on.